Okay, so about a few issues making the headlines this morning. But let's get on to what made headlines on Monday when we came back to the first trading and business day of the month, which is July, and the half year is the PMI for the month of June. We had the central bank data last Friday. Then on Monday, we have the independent FBN Quest report saying that the manufacturing sector is not really up to speed. We're just trying to tag along, as it were, on previous month, but we have a bit of analysis to do here. Let's bring in Michael Famoroti, who is the chief economist at Vetiva Capital Management, to weigh into this conversation. Yesterday, Vetiva Capital rolled out a report looking at this PMI and had a few issues there. Michael, it's good to see you. Good morning.
Morning, pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I put these numbers together for us. What's the highlight of what you folks decided to release as to where we're going with the industrial manufacturing sector?
Well, so the June numbers pointed out a couple of things. One of them is that in terms of economic activity, momentum was relatively unchanged from May. But another thing that the June numbers suggest, and actually this isn't just the June numbers, but numbers dating back to the start of the year, but PMI numbers, at least the ones from the CBN, haven't reflected any change in the agriculture sector. And we know that that's an industry that has gone through negative shocks coming into 2018, primarily because of the herdsmen situation and the middle belt. So that hasn't filtered through the numbers, of course. But overall, the story really is, at least going by the PMI data, the pace of the economic expansion that we have seen so far is relatively unchanged, and there's really nothing new going on in the economy right now.
Yeah, well, that's broadly speaking, and that's why you titled it slightly brisker economic expansion in June. Do you think the PMI speaks to the fact there's a bit of a economic expansion?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, we know that the economy has been growing this year. The question really is how much. First quarter of the year, GDP growth came in below expectations at around 2%, which was significantly below most expectations. And we know that part of that was because of agriculture, but also weaknesses in sectors like real estate, trade. And what we've been looking at is to see how or whether the PMI is reflecting any change in these key areas. Like I said, it hasn't really reflected the realities of agriculture, but going by PMI data, there hasn't been much change either on the real estate, trade, and similar fronts.
How do you think we arrived at, if we look at the June PMI, how did we arrive at a very strong agriculture sector PMI, despite the violent realities that we see around the country's food basket, the North Central, and a little bit push up towards the Northeast?
Well, yeah, so it's not something that I like to speculate too much about, but what it is really is that PMI is a sentiment survey. So the central bank will survey a number of producers in the agricultural sector and ask them how they think things are compared to the previous month. Now we know that the central bank successfully surveyed about 1,500 businesses across the different industries that they look at. How many of these would be in agriculture, I don't know, but my hunch would be that they are likely to focus on some of the bigger producers who may be a bit more hedged in terms of the violence that we have seen, because it's mainly affected the smaller, more subsistence farmers who cumulatively contribute a lot to the economy but may not be captured in the PMI surveys.
This is how your report was concluded, in the manner of speaking. Conservative short-term outlook, and you folks wrote in your report at Vetiva that no material change in economic momentum can be read from the recent PMI data. So we are reserved in our expectations concerning economic performance in Q2 and Q3 2018.
Yeah, so like I mentioned before, Q1 growth wasn't particularly good, and we've been looking at PMI data as well as other factors to see if there's been much of a change in Q2, but also now in Q3. So far, it's not promising. In reality, things have gotten a bit worse, particularly in the agriculture and oil space. So that's not promising, and that's what underpins our expectations or our conservative outlook for this period.
What about Q4? What's the outlook?
Yeah, so Q4 we see a bigger boost from government spending, especially. Budget was passed in June, so we expect the larger capital disbursements to come over the next few months. We also know that electioneering would have gotten into full steam at that point. So we think demand will be supported by government spending in Q4, which should be a short-term boost. And we're hopeful that we are not going to see any sort of major or further insecurity shocks.
I'll be having an interview with the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Industry, Trade and Investment from our Abuja studios in the next couple of minutes after this conversation with you on this very key question about the Buhari means business. What would be your key question if you have Dr. Olajumoke in the room to speak with? What would be your key concern as an economist?
Well, I think the key concern really would be, so they've done pretty well on their short-term ease of doing business plans, but really what is the long-term plan for ease of doing business in respect to directing more foreign direct investment, because that's still something that we haven't seen enough of.
Okay, fair and simple. One straight question, and I'm going to be asking that question on your behalf when she comes on for a very extensive interview and a look to review the presidential enabling business that was reviewed just on June the 25th. Thank you very much, Michael Famoro, the Chief Economist at Vetiva Capital Management. Of course, Dr. Olajumoke is joining us live from Abuja studios. Dr. Jumoke Oduwole is the Senior Special Advisor to the President on Industry, Trade and Investment. She's got everything under her fingernails when you talk about the ease of doing business and the investments the country is making, including trade. This will be part of the issues to look out for. This is one interview you don't want to miss. We're right back in 2. This is Your Business Morning.